Gwe. Hello, Donda Luisi, Mary Beth Doucette. I'm pleased to be sharing this information with you about the Burdor Lakes CEPI Research Project, one of the Shared Future research projects that's based in Mi'kmaq territory in the district of Unama'ki, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. This is the second video of a number of short videos that I've pre-recorded to facilitate knowledge sharing of the preliminary results of the Shared Future CEPI Research Project. In every presentation, I want to start by quickly reviewing the project objectives and highlighting where we are in the process. A more detailed description of the research process was provided in presentation 1. If you haven't reviewed that video yet, I encourage you to do so. For this project, there are two overarching objectives. First, we want to understand the possibilities, pitfalls, and complexities of implementing Etowaptamunk Two-Eyed Seeing within a long-term intersectoral partnership focused on human land health. And secondly, we want to foster reflexivity, co-learning, and reconciliation within the CEPI by deepening CEPI members' understandings of Etowaptamunk Two-Eyed Seeing while strengthening your and our capacity and commitment to enact Etowaptamunk Two-Eyed Seeing. In this video, I will be talking about the history and the concepts of time, past and present, and the histories that influence the way we engage with the CEPI today. So I'll start by explaining why we decided that the CEPI history is an important theme to discuss with the group. Then I'll discuss what I've been referring to as the 3 phases of CEPI history and how we've been using these phases to compile the CEPI timeline. We'll be referring back to the various important events from the past as we explain the other themes, and so we wanted to start here so we have a common framework for the organizational history. And finally, I want to present a series of discussion questions that we hope you will reflect on and join us to discuss during the knowledge sharing discussion in November. And so before I begin talking about history, I want to quickly make a note here. Within some academic circles, the concepts of history and the past are sometimes contested and debated. And so with this in mind, we can't take history and the past for granted because all the things that happened in the past are not necessarily treated as historical events. So in this project, we understand history as having multiple contested definitions, and we're using it here to deliberately focus our discussion on the complex nature of histories and the past, people, events, and relationships that may influence our understandings today. Why did we start with the topic of history? Well, as we were doing the preliminary interviews, we asked people to tell us about their experiences with CEPI. We were told many stories of past events, and they told us how they came to be part of the CEPI and when the CEPI started. During those conversations, there were points when people couldn't remember the exact order of operations when things happened, but they told us the stories nonetheless because they were important moments. And so we start with history because we don't want to take for granted that everyone has the same reference points from the past or that they have a shared sense of all the important points that continue to shape our understandings of the CEPI organization today. And so we start with history and by creating a timeline so that everyone can engage with this conversation with a common set of reference points to shape the discussion. And after reviewing the video today, if you think we've missed something important, please let us know. At the end of the research process, we hope to provide an electronic archive of important documents for the CEPI. And though we've gathered and assembled many documents for this archive already, we also want to confirm that we haven't missed any important or significant moments. And so I'll begin by telling you a little bit more about how we became to appreciate the importance of the CEPI's past. In many of the interviews, people told us about how they came to be involved in the CEPI, and Stan also provided us with an initial timeline that had been compiled. And so it started in 2004 with the official creation or the adoption of the name, the Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative. The name was on the program of the Burdor Lakes Workshop, and the Burdor Charter was also drafted in 2004. So since then, everything that's happened under the banner of the CEPI can be thought of as contributing to the life of the CEPI. And so the official CEPI archive thus includes any documents that were produced for the purposes of CEPI organizing. For example, meeting minutes, planning documents, published works like reports or handbooks, event programs, and proceedings. And we have provided a full bibliography of documents as a PDF file for everyone to review. But so then a funny thing happened as we started interviewing people. People started referring to events and important meetings that happened prior to the official birth of the CEPI. The Bredor Lakes workshop that happened in 2003, for example, didn't refer to the Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative, but it was clearly an important event that set the stage for the future work of CEPI. Similarly, Similarly, there were other Bredor Lakes ecosystem workshops and events in 1999 that various influential CEPI members attended, but it was prior to the official naming of the CEPI. So we began to think about needing to describe a period of pre-CEPI histories, events that happened in the past that helped to shape the dialogues that are present at the CEPI table now, and collaboration events that interviewees told us were important. Then, in compiling the pre-CEPI collaborative events, we also asked what made the collaboration events so memorable or so significant. And that brings us back even further to the period prior to collaboration, when people were not collaborating. Because we so often think about two-eyed seeing as representative of the Western eye and the Mi'kmaq eye, it made sense to also think of these two perspectives as providing separate and distinct formative contexts or lenses. And so, with this in mind, we decided to refer to the first historical period as the one before collaboration, when there was less collaboration and more separation. Separation between the Mi'kmaq and Canadians, and separation between scientist voices and all the other voices of people who lived around the lake or who invested in the lakes. And so we've chosen punctuation points that seem to represent a shift or a change in the tone in the way people around the lakes communicated and collaborated with one another. So our proposed model has three phases. Phase one is defined by separation, it's 1975 to 1995, when there was clear separation between two social activities and environment-centered discourses, those of the Mi'kmaq and Canadians. And so, although both were talking about environmental health of the watershed, um, although they were both talking about the environmental health of the watershed, they were happening in separate conversations. Then in phase two, which we've defined as collaboration and Indigenous and non-Indigenous dialogue, we chose 1995 as a punctuation point for two reasons. The timing of the Middle Shoal case was a significant legal case in which the Mi'kmaq, under the direction and leadership of Charlie Joe Dennis and Dan Christmas, had their rights recognized with the need for a duty to consult. And then in the most recent phase, the period that started in 2004 and forward to present, we're referring to what most people would say is the official CEPI history. And so now we have the first phase of the CEPI that can be described as cultural separation. The context in this period is thus defined by national socio-political contexts. And we started here with the peace and friendship treaties. And we also include the taking care of the Bredor Lakes. The last event actually is 1992 with the formalization of the management group for the Bredor planning. And then the second phase started in 1995 with the taking care of the Bredor Lakes, because Charlie was clearly involved in that process, and he thought he brought with him the support of the Unama'ki chiefs. And then although the Middle Shoal case may represent separation, it was also described as the birth of the CEPI, and we've included it because interviewees explained that the court case reaffirmed that governments have a duty to consult with the Mi'kmaq, and it also reinforced the need for more scientific and environmental studies. We're going to talk more about the Middle Shoal case in the next presentation. And then in the formalized CEPI ongoing action, tension, and negotiation. We start that in 2004 and move forward when we have all the official events and activities that were completed under the CEPI brand and the CEPI agenda. And so this is 16 years of activities. We could probably break it down by other punctuation points as well to represent shifts. And I probably think that in the middle here, maybe in 2016 with the Spirit of the Lakes workshop, that might be a reflection point, but that remains to be seen, and we can talk about that later. And so now, with this framework in mind, for thinking about the CEPI timeline as a set of 3 periods, I want to briefly reiterate some examples from the interviewees that led us to create this timeline in this way. And so we've reframed them as in this presentation and in other presentations as possibilities, pitfalls, and complexities. So here we started with complexities, and we provide the following quotes from the interviews to highlight how inconsistency may create confusion or uncertainty in discussion about CEPI's past. So the first quote talks about CEPI's birthday. It wasn't formally birthed until the early 2000s, maybe 2004, 2003. Well, another interviewee talks about the birth time of being around 2004, 2005, or another still about the Middle Shoal case as being the birth of the CEPI. And then finally, there's another person that was speaking about the official birth of CEPI was referred to as 2003 and 2004, the 2 conferences. That was the official birth of the CEPI out of those 2 conferences. And then when we talk about the complexities, they then lead us to think about some of the pitfalls that come along with having different understandings of history. And so different re-entry dates into the CEPI or how people arrive at the CEPI table may lead to different understandings of the CEPI history and its purpose, its work and accomplishments. And these 3 quotes that are here highlight some of the complexity that comes along with and some of the pitfalls that come along with having different entry and re-entry points. For example, in these 3 quotes, the first quote references somebody joining that had no orientation. Their predecessor had passed and they weren't recruited, but they had no knowledge transfer when they arrived. In the second quote, they talk, it's a government representative who may be replaced, or the interviewee was talking about how government representatives come to the table and they're replacing somebody else, but you get the feeling that they've been briefed before they come to a meeting. You never really know what that briefing entails. And so we make assumptions maybe that people are being briefed and maybe they aren't being briefed. The last interview that we put here also refers to the process of some people coming and then leaving and then returning back a couple of years later. And so at that point, they might not fully appreciate all the changes that had happened over a period of 7 years of being away. And so for this presentation, we want to talk about a couple of possibilities that were brought out as well from the interviews. And we consider providing want you to consider providing resources to welcome and orient new members to the CEPI, and that would be one possibility that came up. For example, in the last quote that's here, the second quote that's here, we might want an orientation package or something that could provide people with a bit of an understanding of what elements of the CEPI are most important. The other quote that's here suggests that maybe we could go back to the People of the Lakes document and just read it and think about it. Although it's not perfect, it's somewhere to start, and everything really that is part of the CEPI maybe should be reviewed and revamped as time goes on. And so, as I said earlier, we started with the theme of history because we don't want to take for granted that everyone has the same reference points for the past or that they have a shared sense of all the important points that continue to shape our understandings of the CEPI organization today. We've proposed the timeline so that everyone engaged in this conversation will have a common set of reference points for discussion. And we've also provided a more detailed list in the form of a PDF file that can be included and downloaded with historical moments so that we can update that. And so the questions that we have now are, did we miss any significant events, critical turning points, documents or other details? Have we prioritized everything accurately? Um, and what are the most important events for new CEPI members to be aware of? For example, if we were to create an orientation package. Um, and the last point that's here on this slide is that we will provide a bibliography of archival documents that were used during the secondary research process. They're available upon request if you email Carolyn_Barber at cbu.ca. And we would also be pleased to include any other relevant documents you feel should be in the ISF CEPI archive. Finally, as we said in the last presentation, there's a schedule of events, a list of 6 topics, and when we will be discussing them live. We ask you to please contact Carolyn by email to register for Zoom sessions. And if you want to be part of all or part of them, we welcome as many people as want to be involved. And Carolyn, if you contact her, she'll answer questions. She'll also send a meeting invite to join those Zoom sessions. Likewise, you can contact myself, Mary Beth Doucette, marybeth_doucette at cbu.ca. And we hope to see you soon. Namultas Walalin, thank you.